But after one more speaker, a speaker who has been influencing the way we think about cities for a long time, has been a great thought leader in our culture and beyond. And his contributions are also contemporary. In fact, just last week, he released a book, The Metropolitan Revolution. Well, actually, just yesterday was released, and I'm sure he would recommend it to all of us. David Brooks, the New York Times columnist, said of the book, we are seeing a power inversion in public life, where cities are taking on more and more responsibility as other levels of government dither. So please welcome our final speaker this morning, a name that we all know if we've been following cities at all, from the Brookings Institute. Please welcome, not David Brooks, excuse me, but Bruce Katz. Bruce.
Okay, so book released. You can download a free app on your iPad, and I'll show you how to do that when I'm through this. What I really want to do is just give the main messages of the book and show you some of the animations and videos from the iPad. So let's just start with the reality, and it's pretty harsh. We're in the middle of a pivotal decade in the United States. I would call it a shock decade. We need to grow 10.1 million jobs to make up the jobs we lost during the recession to keep pace with population dynamics. We need better jobs. And this is probably the most shocking statistic I'll show you. 81 million people in poverty or near poverty in 2000, jumps to 107 million in 2011, partly because of the recession, partly because we had a manufacturing collapse during the 2000s. So the point is we need to restructure our economy from an economy pre-recession that was characterized by consumption and debt to an economy that is fueled by innovation, ideas and manufacturing, powered by low carbon and advanced energy, driven by exports and global engagement, and yes, an economy that is rich with opportunity and works for working families. There's a minor challenge. Our federal government, like Elvis, has decided to leave the building. This is a quote from West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, former governor Joe Manchin, during the sequestration debacle, which is affecting cities and metropolitan areas all over the country. But there's a structural issue here. Over the next decade, as our demographics age, as they will in Europe, as they will in China, we're going to see a major shift in the federal government. The federal government is going to become essentially an ATM machine for older people, and it's going to drive down and squeeze out spending and investment on infrastructure and research and development and education and workforce development. And cities and metropolitan areas are going to have to figure out how they're going to compensate for this, both with their own resources and with private and civic investments as well. Hence the Metropolitan Revolution, right, which is essentially our notion that cities and metropolitan leaders are stepping up and doing the hard work in the absence of the federal government and, frankly, in the absence of many states to grow more jobs and make their economies more prosperous. They're doing this because they're powerful. There are 388 metropolitan areas in the United States. The top 100 sit on only 1/8 of our land mass. They're 2/3 of our population. They're 3/4 of our GDP. And on everything that matters to a national economy or to a society, educated workers, foreign-born, infrastructure, innovation, they're at 75, 80, 85, 90% of the national share. There is no American economy. All we are is a network of city and metropolitan economies. And here's what they're about to do. For decades, the United States built its economy on debt and consumption. For cities, this meant throwing public money at sports arenas and stealing businesses from their neighbors with tax breaks. But what about after the game? You can't build an economy around beer and hot dogs. And what happens when the businesses you stole leave for a better deal somewhere else? The Great Recession was a wake-up call. We forgot the fundamentals. Productive and innovative growth drive consumption, not the other way around. Smart metro leaders are going back to basics, investing in infrastructure, making manufacturing a priority again,
connecting small businesses with investors in new markets, helping workers get the skills they need. If metros get the basics right, the beer and hot dogs will follow.
What we see happening around the country, and I mean, it's really a pleasure, by the way, to follow Amanda, because what you've achieved here, I think, really has just sent a signal all over this country and, frankly, all over the world about the importance of placemaking as a platform for economy shaping. Now, we focus in our book on several really interesting examples of game-changing initiatives. We focus on Denver and Los Angeles using local resources to build out state-of-the-art transit along many of the principles that Amanda described. We look at Northeast Ohio, that before we even started talking about the reshoring of production in the United States, began to support their small and medium-sized manufacturing firms. We focus on New York, the Applied Sciences District, a really major play to diversify an economy and set a platform for tech-oriented growth over many decades. We focus on Portland, where you see a city and a metropolis essentially heeding the notion that we should double exports in the United States over the next 5 years and look for new growth abroad. We look at Houston, where a network of 21st century settlement houses are integrating tens of thousands of new immigrants into the economic mainstream. And we even look at Detroit. With all the bad news in Detroit, we look at the downtown and the midtown. We're off a base of Wayne State and Henry Ford Health System and Detroit Medical Campus and the College for Creative Studies and clusters of tech and creative studies. They are reviving that city from its very core. So let's focus on the applied sciences example, because we think this is really interesting from both a substantive and procedural perspective. In the depths of the recession, Bloomberg and his team convene hundreds of corporate, civic, and university leaders and say, we basically need to take the recession as a wake-up call. We cannot continue to be so dependent on financial services. We need to put a marker down around tech and engineering and innovation, not just as a diversification play, but because so many of our industries in this city depend on technology workers and depend on constant innovation. $130 million of local resources, hard choices, $2 billion leveraged primarily from the Cornell Technion move to Roosevelt Island, and over the next 30 years expected 30 billion plus of private investment, close to 50,000 jobs, 1,000 companies created. This is the smart kind of productive, innovative, sustainable growth model, again, that we need post-recession. Let's hear Bob Steele.
As you look at the economy in New York, we have a lot of strengths, but it's clear everywhere in industry that technology is disrupting business models. And so while applied science and engineering can help startup companies, it's also required for the key industries that are already here.
These great institutions that have made a commitment to come to New York, not in an ivory tower tradition, but to partner with industry, to partner with the corporate community, to really design the next generation of whole industries.
It really is a momentum that has fed upon itself. You've seen the reality on the ground change, and as the reality on the ground has changed, I think the ambition of the various universities in turn has continued to ratchet up. And this is a virtuous cycle that we hope continues for many, many years into the future.
So this is the new kind of economic development. This is where we see it happening, though frankly there are many stories around the country, and this is what we're saying to cities and metropolitan areas all across the United States. The message is you're on your own. Washington is mired in partisan gridlock today and will be for some period of time. They are not riding to the rescue. So here's what folks have to do. You've got to create your own network. You've got to find your own network. It's not really just government. Cities are not governments like the federal government or the state government. They are networks of leaders. And obviously that starts with some elected leaders, whether it's mayors or governors or county officials. But what really matters to cities is to find the business groups and the CEOs and the major employers, and to also work with the universities and the civics and the philanthropies. This is what makes cities strong. Cities collaborate to compete. Cities basically have powerful institutions that are powerful in their own right, but they're even more powerful when they come together and work together to do grand things. Set your vision. You know, there's always this notion that cities want to be like other places. Oh, we want to be the next Silicon Valley, right? Well, that's not really going to happen because cities are really different from each other on the fundamentals. What Phoenix makes, what it trades in the global economy is different than Pittsburgh, and the same for Detroit and Denver. So find out what makes you special in the world, your special assets, your special attributes, your special advantages. As Dolly Parton, the great 20th century philosopher said, find out who you are and do it on purpose. And then finally, find your game changer. These are the game changers we've identified in the book, right? But frankly, there are a whole bunch of others that are happening around the country right now, or that could happen around the country as this notion that Washington has left the building really begins to be absorbed into our political and societal zeitgeist. Here's, I think, where we're headed.
From an early age, we are taught how our nation is supposed to work. The president, vice president, and members of Congress sit at the top. Governors and legislators run their states. The rest of us take our cues from them. While states and the federal government may be part of the Constitution, our population and economic power is actually concentrated in our metropolitan areas. It's time to rethink power in America. In this century, metros will lead, and states and the federal government will follow. In cities and metros, public, private, and civic leaders are helping workers get the skills they need, investing in infrastructure and growing jobs through expanded trade and investment, the hard work necessary to renew our economy.
So that's our subtle message. Our cities are powerful, they are networked, they are attuned to the new city age, and what we need to do is basically step up and take back the country. We already are the engines of the economy. We're the centers of trade and investment. We are the front lines of demographic change. We are the vehicles for environmental sustainability and social progress. So there is a metropolitan revolution today, and there will be more to come. Download the app, read the book, see the movie, well, sort of. Look forward to a few questions. Thank you very much. Any thoughts, comments, criticisms? Yep.
I'm Dick Anderson from the New York Building Congress.
Great, sir.
Your message is quite clear that metropolitan economies need to fend for themselves, but don't they rely heavily on national fiscal and monetary policy? What should metropolitan areas ask of national and fiscal policy?
I think that's a great question. I think we now need, really, as city and metropolitan leaders, to understand what we need from higher levels of government. The first thing that higher levels of government should do is what we can't do. I don't think it makes any sense in a country of our size to have cities basically be the place where we ensure that our food is safe, or secure our borders, or really set the platform around large-scale financial and environmental rules. So on the platform setting, that's why you need a national government to set a common market. We also need a national government to make investments in a safety net. And you saw the sort of shifting of funding towards Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, and to a lesser extent, entitlement funding for the least advantaged in our country. I mean, you don't want cities and metropolitan areas have to bear the burden of that. And then there are other investments that the national government in particular makes in advanced research and development. When I looked at Applied Science District, and the reason why it is growing in Roosevelt Island, it's because of that platform of NIH funding and NSF funding and DARPA funding. I mean, the United States really has the network of advanced research institutions that no one can match in the world because our national government has invested in it. But for many other things in the United States, many other areas of domestic policy, frankly, most of the investments come from this level in collaboration with the state and with the private and civic investors. And therefore, I think the message is get the platform right, But on everything else, be in the service of city and metropolitan vision and priorities. Last time I checked, we are still a representative democracy. And I really think that the national government and our state governments now need to act in the service of our cities and metros because they are the engines. So that's how I would respond to that question. Other thoughts, comments? If not, going once, going twice, going 3 times, please download the app, enjoy it, send it to friends, send it to colleagues. I think as we go forward with this book, our hope is to inspire and to catalyze and to work with cities and metropolitan leaders across this country to find their game changer. Thank you very much.